November 20th, 1943, Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands. The darkness before dawn yields to the roar of naval bombardment as the battleships Maryland and Colorado unleash 16-inch shells upon Japanese positions. In the lagoon, Marines from the 2nd Marine Division wade through water up to their chests, their landing craft stranded on the coral reef 500 yards from the shore. Among them is Staff Sergeant William Bordelon of the 1st Battalion, 18th Marines, who clutches his equipment bag filled with demolition charges while his M1911A1 pistol remains securely in its holster, already drenched in seawater, yet mechanically flawless. The Japanese defenders, numbering 4,500 under Rear Admiral Kei Shibazaki, have fortified this small coral island, which spans less than 3 square miles, into a stronghold. Their officers are armed with the Type 14 Nambu pistol, the Empire's standard sidearm chambered in 8 old 922 mm. As the Marines navigate the perilous lagoon, Japanese machine guns fire from hidden pillboxes. The unforeseen low tide has transformed what was intended to be a swift, amphibious assault into a desperate struggle through waist-deep water under relentless fire. The events that unfold over the next 76 hours will illustrate with mathematical accuracy the superiority of American small arms design, particularly the M1911A, which fires its lethal 45 ACP cartridge compared to Japanese weapons that fail at critical moments. In the close quarters chaos of Tarawa, where combat distances shrink to mere feet and inches, the distinction between a 230-grain bullet delivering 370 FTLB of energy and a 100-grain projectile with barely 220 FTLB becomes a matter of life and death. The battles occurring across the Pacific in 1943 reveal a fundamental truth that goes beyond mere technical specifications. The gap between American and Japanese military sidearms signifies not only differing design philosophies, but also vastly different industrial capabilities, tactical doctrines, and an understanding of what constitutes an effective combat weapon. The M1911A1 automatic pistol, which fires the 45 automatic Colt pistol cartridge, represents the pinnacle of decades of American combat experience and industrial advancement. In contrast, the Type 14 Nambu, with its underpowered 8mm round and delicate mechanism, illustrates Japan's struggle to keep pace with Western military technology, hindered by a lack of industrial capacity and combat feedback essential for effective weapon development. This disparity became evident in every close-quarters engagement from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, where the resounding fire of the American 45 consistently overshadowed the insufficient report of the Japanese 8mm model. The narrative of these two firearms transcends mere ballistics and manufacturing. It encapsulates how industrial dominance and engineering prowess dictate success in contemporary warfare. The origins of the M1911A1 can be traced not to the Pacific, but to the jungles of the Philippines 4 decades prior. During the Philippine-American War from 1899 to 1902, American forces encountered a terrifying tactical challenge that would forever alter the development of military sidearms. The Moros Juramados, Muslim fighters who bound their limbs with leather to minimize blood loss, and consumed local drugs to numb pain, executed suicidal assaults against American positions. The standard military sidearm, the Colt Model 1892 double-action revolver, chambered in .38 long Colt, proved disastrously inadequate. Colonel Louis LaGarde chronicled the typical encounter in his medical reports, noting that soldiers would empty their revolvers into the charging Moros, delivering multiple shots to the center mass, only to witness in horror as their assailants continued to advance, killing Americans with bladed weapons. LaGarde's 1904 report recounted the case of Antonio Caspier, who was shot 4 times at close range with 38 rounds, 3 bullets perforating his lungs and 1 passing entirely through his body, yet he persisted in fighting until finally subdued by a rifle butt to the forehead. The 38 long Colt 150 grain bullet, traveling at 770 feet per second, simply did not possess the kinetic energy transfer required for immediate incapacitation. This inadequacy led to the most extensive ballistic study ever conducted for military small arms, known as the Thompson-LaGarde Tests of 1904. Colonel John T. Thompson, who would later create the Thompson submachine gun, along with Major Louis Anatole LaGarde from the Medical Corps, was assigned the task of identifying the minimum effective caliber for military pistols. At the Nelson Morris Company Union's stockyards in Chicago, they performed tests that would be deemed barbaric by contemporary standards, yet yielded essential scientific data. The tests involved firing at live cattle and human cadavers using various calibers, including 7.654 65-21 mm Parabellum, 30 Luger 9,490 mm Parabellum, 38 Long Colt, 38 ACP 45 Colt, 476 Elay, and 455 Webley. The methodology was meticulous, involving the recording of time to incapacitation for live animals, measuring body sway in suspended cadavers, and examining wound channels through dissection alongside the newly developed X-ray technology. The findings were clear-cut. Animals shot with 30 Luger exhibited minimal distress even after 10 rounds. Those impacted by 9mm or 38 calibers displayed a more significant effect, often necessitating 8 or more shots. Animals hit with 45 caliber rounds generally collapsed by the 4th shot, with immediate and severe physiological trauma apparent. The cadaver tests uncovered even more striking differences. When bullets impacted bone shafts, the researchers assigned numerical values to body oscillation. The 45 caliber rounds consistently generated 2 to 3 times more movement than smaller calibers. The board's conclusion was definitive. A bullet that can deliver the shock and stopping effect at short ranges required for a military pistol or revolver must have a caliber of no less than 0.45 inches. They observed that below this threshold, no increase in velocity within handgun parameters could make up for inadequate bullet mass. John Moses Browning, already celebrated for his innovations in firearms, was collaborating with Colt on a 41 caliber semi-automatic pistol when the Army's specifications became apparent. Browning swiftly adapted his design to fit a 45 caliber cartridge, resulting in what would later be known as the Model 1905. The cartridge experienced multiple revisions among Colt, Winchester Repeating Arms, Frankfurt Arsenal, and the Union Metallic Cartridge Company. The initial loading, featuring a 200-grain bullet at 900 feet per second, transformed into the standardized military load of a 230-grain full metal jacket bullet at 830 feet per second from a 5-inch barrel. The brilliance of Browning's design resided in its straightforwardness and durability. The M1911 employed a short recoil operation with a swinging link that disengaged the barrel from the slide during cycling. The single-action trigger ensured a consistently crisp pull. 2 safety features, grip safety that needed to be pressed, and manual thumb safety prevented unintentional discharge while facilitating quick deployment. The 7-round detachable magazine could be swiftly replaced, and the pistol was capable of firing the round in the chamber even without a magazine inserted, which was vital when magazines were compromised or lost. The pistol underwent rigorous testing from 1906 to 1911, competing against designs from Savage, Luger, and others. The endurance tests were remarkable, firing 6,000 rounds as quickly as possible, achieved in just 27 minutes. The heated pistol was submerged in water, mud, and sand between firing strings. The Browning Colt design operated flawlessly. On March 29, 1911, the U.S. Army officially adopted the 45 caliber automatic pistol model of 1911. Combat experiences from World War I prompted enhancements that were integrated into the M1911A, which was standardized in 1924. The enhancements were a response to soldier feedback from the front lines, including a shorter trigger designed for smaller hands, scalloped cuts in the frame behind the trigger to improve reach, an arched mainspring housing for better natural pointing, a longer grip safety spur to prevent hammer bite, wider sights for quicker acquisition, and a shortened hammer spur to minimize snagging. Although these modifications may appear minor, they exemplified the American military's methodical approach to integrating combat experiences into the development of equipment. The 0.45 ACP cartridge itself showcased optimized ballistic performance within practical limits, operating at a relatively low chamber pressure of 21,000 psi, in contrast to 35,000 psi for the 9mm Parabellum. This round emphasized reliability and barrel longevity. The 230-grain projectiles, measuring 0.451 inches in diameter, produced a wound channel significantly larger than its caliber due to tissue displacement. Traveling at 830 feet per second, the bullet moved just below the speed of sound, thus avoiding the instability associated with transonic flight. The heavy bullet effectively retained energy, preserving lethal force even at extended handgun ranges of 50 yards. When the United States entered World War II, the production of the M1911A1 shifted from a peacetime trickle to a wartime flood, showcasing American industrial strength at its peak. Colt's manufacturing company, which held the original patents and production expertise, promptly increased output at their facility in Hartford, Connecticut. However, even Colt's maximum production capacity of approximately 800 pistols per day by 1943 could not satisfy the demand. The Ordnance Department, led by Brigadier General Gladian Barnes, orchestrated one of the most effective distributed manufacturing programs of the war. Unlike the artisanal methods required for complex weapons, the robust design of the M1911A1 facilitated mass production techniques. Contracts were awarded to companies lacking prior firearms experience but possessing strong manufacturing capabilities. Remington Rand, a manufacturer of typewriters, secured its initial contract in March 1942. Their facility in Syracuse, New York, which was retooled from producing typing machines and adding devices, ultimately produced 877-751 M1911A1 pistols, surpassing all other contractors, including Colt. Their production techniques transformed pistol manufacturing through the extensive use of stamping rather than forging, automated checkering of grip frames, and the implementation of statistical quality control that upheld tolerances while accelerating production. Ithaca Gun Company, based in New York and traditionally known for shotguns, manufactured 369,129 pistols. Their innovative application of investment casting for small components decreased machining time by 60%. Union Switch and Signal Company, located in Swissvale, Pennsylvania, a manufacturer of railroad equipment, produced 55,000 pistols of outstanding quality, utilizing enhanced heat treatment processes that increased barrel life by 30%. The contribution of the Singer Manufacturing Company, although numerically limited to 500 pistols, showcased the adaptability of American industry. These sewing machine manufacturers created educational firearms of such caliber that they are still the most coveted M1911A variants among collectors. Singer developed tooling and processes that were later shared with other manufacturers, amplifying their influence beyond their direct output. Parts standardization was absolute, allowing any component from any manufacturer to function in any frame. Tolerances were intentionally broad, ranging from 0.0 to 0.05 inches in the most critical dimensions, ensuring functionality despite variations in manufacturing, field contamination, or thermal expansion. This interchangeability was vital, especially when depot-level maintenance often required assembling operational pistols from parts of multiple damaged weapons. The ammunition supply chain was aligned with weapon production. Frankfurt Arsenal, the primary ammunition facility for the Army, produced over 1 billion rounds of .45 ACP during the war. The Western Cartridge Company, Remington Arms, and Winchester Repeating Arms produced an additional 2 billion rounds. Stringent quality control measures were implemented. Each lot was subjected to accuracy testing, pressure testing, and function testing across various weapons. Specifications remained uniform throughout the production process. The ammunition featured a 230-grain bullet with 5.00 grains of powder, utilizing either bullseye or a similar burning rate, achieving a velocity of 830 feet per second with a tolerance of plus or minus 25 feet per second. Special variants of ammunition showcased American ingenuity. The M12 shot cartridge, designed for aircrew survival kits, contained 118 pieces of No. 7 and 122 birdshot encased in a paper capsule, effective against small game at distances up to 10 feet. The enhanced M15 shot cartridge utilized a blue wax capsule to improve moisture resistance. Tracer rounds were developed for training purposes, enabling shooters to visualize their bullet trajectories. Proof loads, identifiable by stanic-stained cases, were tested for +P pressure resistance during the manufacturing process. The evolution of the Marine Corps table of organization reflected the lessons learned from combat regarding the significance of pistols. In 1942, a Marine division was authorized to possess 798 pistols, primarily allocated to officers, non-commissioned officers, and crew-served weapon teams. By December 1943, following the Battle of Tarawa, this number increased to 1,277. By 1945, the authorization had risen to 1,177 pistols per division. The 1st Marine Division on Okinawa was equipped with over 2,000 M1911A1s, with many riflemen obtaining pistols through unofficial means. Distribution was prioritized for combat units. The 2nd Marine Division at Tarawa was armed with 1,456 M1911A1 pistols for approximately 18,000 Marines, equating to 1 pistol per 12 men. The 5th Marine Division carried 1,789 pistols for a similar number of personnel, averaging 1 pistol per 10 men. Army units exhibited comparable trends. The 77th Infantry Division on Okinawa was equipped with 1,234 M1911A1s among 16,000 soldiers. The Type 14 Nambu represented Imperial Japan's endeavor to develop a modern military sidearm. However, its developmental history highlights the inherent limitations that would ultimately hinder its effectiveness in combat. Colonel Kijiro Nambu, frequently referred to as the John Browning of Japan, created his first semi-automatic pistol in 1902. This Type A Grandpa Nambu bore a superficial resemblance to the Luger, featuring an exposed barrel and a distinctive knurled cocking knob, yet it functioned on entirely different principles. The Type 14, adopted in Taisho 14 in 1926, according to the Western calendar, evolved from earlier Nambu designs while integrating supposed enhancements derived from Japanese military experiences in China. The pistol employed a locked breech mechanism with a floating locking block, which was conceptually sound but necessitated precise manufacturing tolerances. The unique A8X 22mm Nambu cartridge, specific to Japanese firearms, discharged a 102-grain bullet at approximately 1,065 ft per second from the Type 14's 4.6-inch barrel. On paper, certain specifications appeared superior to those of the M1911A. The Type 14 accommodated 8 rounds compared to 7 in the M1911A. Its muzzle velocity surpassed that of the 45 ACP by 200 ft per second. The pistol's unloaded weight was 2.03 lb, nearly half a pound lighter than the M1911A. Initial production models from Nagoya Arsenal and Kokura Arsenal exhibited exceptional craftsmanship, characterized by deep bluing and meticulous hand-fitting of components. However, these surface advantages concealed fundamental flaws. The 8X 22mm Nambu cartridge, despite its higher velocity, produced only 256 FTLB of muzzle energy, in contrast to the 45 ACP's 369 FTLB, resulting in a 31% shortfall. The lightweight 102-grain bullet lost velocity quickly, retaining merely 180 foot lb at 50 yards, compared to 300 FTLB for the 45 ACP. The bottlenecked case design, while theoretically facilitating feeding, led to extraction issues when chambers became fouled. Furthermore, Japanese military procurement doctrine introduced additional complications. Unlike American forces who were issued weapons, Japanese officers were obligated to purchase their sidearms from their salaries. A Type 14 was priced at 78 yen in 1940, roughly half of a lieutenant's monthly salary. This economic barrier resulted in many officers receiving minimal training, perceiving the pistol more as a status symbol than as a combat tool. Some officers, especially those hailing from affluent families, opted to acquire foreign pistols instead. Common choices included Spanish ruby pistols in 32 ACP or inherited European revolvers. The design philosophy of the Type 14 mirrored the Japanese tactical doctrine, which emphasized spiritual power over firepower. The infantry manual of the Imperial Japanese Army allocated more pages to sword techniques than to pistol marksmanship. Pistols were regarded as tools for executing prisoners, managing subordinates, and ritual suicide, rather than as primary weapons for combat. This doctrinal oversight led to a failure to acknowledge design flaws that would later prove disastrous in battle. As the war progressed, the quality of manufacturing deteriorated significantly. Pre-war Type 14s boasted 17 distinct inspection stamps, meticulous polishing, and hand-fitted components. By 1943, the number of inspection marks had dwindled to 3, surface finishing was abandoned, and the interchangeability of parts had severely declined. Late-war production from the Toriyamatsu factory exhibited tool marks, rough castings, and dimensional inconsistencies that would have failed pre-war inspections. The most critical design shortcomings of the Type 14 revolved around its controls and magazine system. The safety lever, located on the left side above the trigger guard, necessitated a shift in grip by the shooting hand or operation by the support hand, which was unfeasible when injured, carrying equipment, or engaged in combat. The magazine release, a spring-loaded lever situated at the bottom front of the grip, frequently disengaged unintentionally during handling, rendering the pistol inoperable due to the magazine disconnect safety. The modification introduced in 1939 included a magazine retention spring designed to prevent the loss of magazines. However, this enhancement rendered combat reloading nearly impossible as magazines had to be forcibly removed against spring tension, often requiring both hands. In tropical environments, corrosion could cause magazines to become stuck in place. Marines reported instances of capturing Type 4Ts with magazines that were frozen solid, leading to futile attempts to reload by hammering. Production statistics indicate the limitations of Japan's industrial capabilities. Between 1926 and 1945, around 400,000 Type 14 pistols were produced by various arsenals and subcontractors. The highest monthly production reached 3,500 units in 1944, yet the quality was severely lacking. The Nambu Rifle Manufacturing Company, Chuokyo Company, and subsidiaries of Tokyo Gas and Electric manufactured pistols with such inadequate quality control that components from different producers or even from different production batches within the same factory were incompatible. The failures of the Type 14 Nambu in combat were not merely isolated cases, but rather indicative of systematic design flaws that demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of combat needs. Each shortcoming, while possibly acceptable on its own, combined to produce a weapon that failed dramatically under the conditions of Pacific combat. The safety mechanism was the most pressing tactical liability, positioned above the trigger guard on the left side. The safety lever necessitated either a shift in the firing grip, which compromised sight alignment and trigger finger placement, or the use of the support hand. In close-quarters combat, where every millisecond counts, this requirement for two-handed operation proved to be fatal. Marines reported numerous occasions where Japanese officers struggled to disengage safeties while being overwhelmed. In contrast, the M1911A1 featured an ambidextrous safety that could be operated with the thumb of the firing hand, allowing the shooter to maintain grip and trigger position while disengaging the safety during the draw from the holster. Furthermore, the magazine disconnect safety, designed to prevent accidental discharge when the magazine is removed, became a significant vulnerability. If magazines were damaged, lost, or stuck due to corrosion, the entire weapon became inoperative. Unlike the M1911A1, which could fire its chambered round without a magazine, the Type 14 required a functioning and properly seated magazine to operate. In environments like the coral sand of Tarawa or the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, where magazines were prone to damage, this feature rendered countless Type 14s ineffective. The Type 14 was devoid of a slide-hold open mechanism. Upon firing the last round, only the magazine follower kept the bolt in the open position. When the magazine was removed, the bolt would slam forward, providing no indication that the weapon was empty. In combat situations, shooters only realized that the chamber was empty when the trigger clicked without effect. In contrast, the M1911A1's slide lock, activated by the magazine follower, kept the slide open after the last round, offering immediate visual and tactile feedback of an empty weapon while facilitating quicker reloading. The Type 14 suffered from extraction failures, particularly due to the declining quality of ammunition. The bottlenecked 8x 22mm cartridge, which was theoretically better for feeding, resulted in a smaller bearing surface for the extractor, coupled with wartime ammunition that utilized corrosive primers and inconsistent brass cases, which either became stuck in chambers or were torn out by extractors. The straight-walled 45 ACP cartridge, with its larger bearing surface and lower pressure, extracted reliably even from fouled chambers. The recoil spring assembly, a sophisticated dual spring system, necessitated precise manufacturing and upkeep. When the springs lost tension, exacerbated by tropical heat and humidity, cycling became unpredictable and failure to return to battery was frequent, necessitating manual manipulation of the slide. The M1911A1's single recoil spring, even when weakened, typically retained enough functionality for effective combat use. Tropical conditions exposed further weaknesses. The Type 14's stringent manufacturing tolerances, which were acceptable in Japan's temperate climate, turned into liabilities in the Pacific theater. Thermal expansion caused by temperatures reaching 115 degrees Fahrenheit on Palau led to binding actions. The monsoon humidity on Guadalcanal resulted in rust that immobilized mechanisms within days. The M1911A1's intentionally loose tolerances, criticized by target shooters as sloppy, allowed for continued operation despite thermal expansion, corrosion, or contamination. Field maintenance posed insurmountable difficulties. The Type 14 necessitated tools for disassembly, a luxury that was not available in combat. The complete disassembly process consisted of 34 distinct operations, which posed a risk of losing small springs and pins. The M1911A1 could be field stripped in seconds without the need for tools. To begin, one must depress the recoil spring plug, rotate the bushing, and then remove the recoil spring along with the guide. Following this, the slide stop should be pushed out, allowing for the removal of the slide and barrel. The reassembly process is simply the reverse of disassembly. Marines were capable of field stripping, cleaning with whatever resources were at hand, including urine in situations where water was limited, and reassembling the weapon while blindfolded in under 30 seconds. The quality of ammunition exacerbated mechanical failures. By 1944, the Japanese industry faced challenges in producing consistent powder charges and primer compounds. Tests conducted on captured ammunition by American ordnance units revealed velocity variations exceeding 200 feet per second within single lots. Squib loads resulted in bullets becoming lodged in barrels, leading to catastrophic failures when subsequent rounds were fired. Additionally, excessive pressure from rounds with double charges caused frames to crack and chambers to bulge. In contrast, American 45 ACP ammunition exhibited remarkable consistency throughout the war, with velocity variations rarely surpassing 25 feet per second within lots. The true test of these weapons occurred during the intense, close-quarters combat that defined the Pacific Island battles, particularly on Guadalcanal during the fight for Henderson Field from October 24th to 25th, 1942. Sergeant John Bassilone's actions highlighted both the effectiveness of the M1911A1 and the seamless integration of American weapon systems. Although Bassilone is renowned for his machine gun defense, witnesses noted his significant use of the M1911A when Japanese soldiers breached the perimeter. Private First Class Nash Phillips, who was wounded in the battle, later recounted Bassilone operated a machine gun continuously for 3 days and nights without sleep, rest, or food. He was well positioned and caused the Japanese considerable trouble, not only by firing his machine gun, but also by utilizing his pistol. When Japanese soldiers infiltrated the line during hand-to-hand combat, Bassilone's M1911A1 proved to be a decisive factor. Each 230-grain hollow-point bullet, Marines frequently altered ball ammunition by cutting crosses into the tips, which provided immediate stopping power. Phillips recounted observing Japanese soldiers being knocked off their feet by Barcelone's pistol fire. The Japanese offensive on Henderson Field consisted of around 3,000 soldiers from the Sendai Division. In contrast, the Marine defenders numbered less than 700 in Barcelone's sector. The Japanese forces achieved a local numerical advantage of nearly 5-1, necessitating the utmost effectiveness from every American weapon. In such scenarios, the distinction between the 45 ACP's immediate incapacitation and the 8mm Nambu's reduced stopping power was amplified across hundreds of individual encounters. At Tarawa, Staff Sergeant William Bordelong's actions, although primarily involving demolition charges, included crucial moments where small arms made a significant impact. Bordelong, an engineer with the 1st Battalion of the 18th Marines, landed in the assault waves on November 20th, 1943. His amphibious tractor sustained numerous hits, resulting in the deaths of all but 4 Marines aboard. Bordelong's objective was to eliminate Japanese pillboxes using demolition charges, but approaching these positions required suppressive fire. After placing charges on 2 pillboxes, Bordelong was injured by machine gun fire. With his demolition charges depleted, Marine Combat Correspondent Staff Sergeant David Dempsey, who observed the action, reported that Bordelong seized a rifle and continued to fight, providing cover for other Marines as they advanced. While narratives emphasize his demolition efforts, the close-quarters nature of the combat meant that pistols were consistently utilized. Bordelong's M1911A1, like those of all Marine engineers, functioned as his final line of defense while placing charges against enemy positions. The combat failures of the Type 14 were also well documented. At Tarawa, Marine Private Robert Sherid, a Time Life correspondent embedded with the 2nd Marine Division, witnessed a Japanese officer's desperate struggle with his Nambu. The officer was yelling at his troops, attempting to fire his pistol. He repeatedly pulled the trigger, yet nothing occurred. The firearm was jammed, possibly due to sand or a faulty magazine. A Marine shot him with a .45 from approximately 20 feet away. He flew backward as if struck by a sledgehammer. Similar reports emerged from every island battlefield. On Saipan, June 15, 1944, during the significant Japanese Banzai Charge, which became the largest to the Pacific War, Marine Corporal John D. Alessandro of the 27th Marines recounted close combat in the pre-dawn darkness. They advanced towards us in waves with officers at the front brandishing swords and pistols. I observed one officer attempting to clear his jammed Nambu while rushing towards us. He was frantically working the action when I shot him with my .45. One shot to the center mass and he collapsed heavily. The .45 would incapacitate them instantly. The impact felt akin to being struck with a baseball bat. The mathematical reality of stopping power became evident in the after-action medical reports. Marine Corps medical personnel recorded wound characteristics indicating that 45 ACP hits to the torso produced temporary wound cavities exceeding 4 inches in diameter, resulting in an immediate drop in blood pressure and disruption of the nervous system. In contrast, the 8mm Nambu, with its lighter and faster bullet, created wounds that were only slightly larger than its caliber, often necessitating multiple hits for incapacitation. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Chesty Puller, who commanded the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines at Guadalcanal, remarked in his after-action report, "The .45 automatic pistol proved essential in repelling Japanese infiltrators and Banzai attacks. Numerous instances were noted where single rounds from the .45 immediately halted attacking Japanese soldiers, while Enemy officers armed with their standard pistols failed to cause casualties even at close range. The contrast between the M1911A and Type 14 Nambu illustrated fundamentally different military philosophies shaped by distinct cultural and historical experiences. American military doctrine, shaped by the frontier wars and colonial conflicts, placed a high value on firepower and individual marksmanship. In contrast, Japanese doctrine, which is deeply rooted in samurai tradition and the spirit of Yamato Damashi, prioritized spiritual strength over material benefits. The Thompson-LaGarde tests offered American forces a scientific basis for the necessity of maximum stopping power. The assertion that only a .45 caliber round would be adequate became a fundamental principle. This was not simply a matter of preference. It was a requirement grounded in evidence. The tests evaluated not only lethality but also immediate incapacitation, which is the ability to neutralize an assailant before they could close the distance or continue their attack. The timing aspect was vital in close quarters combat, as the distinction between immediate and eventual incapacitation could be measured in American lives. This focus on practical effectiveness was reflected in American training at Paris Island and Camp Pendleton. Marines discharged thousands of rounds during pistol training. The training regimen commenced with bullseye marksmanship, where they learned trigger control, sight alignment, and breathing techniques before advancing to combat shooting. Marines were instructed to fire from a retention position with the pistol held against their ribs to engage in point shooting without the use of sights and to target multiple adversaries while in motion. The standard qualification required achieving 70% accuracy on man-sized targets at a distance of 25 yards, firing 50 rounds under time constraints. The Manual of Arms for the M1911A1 underscored the importance of combat efficiency. Although not referred to as such in 1943, the Israeli draw technique was already a standard practice. This involved drawing the weapon while simultaneously disengaging the safety, with the finger entering the trigger guard only after the muzzle had cleared the holster and was aimed at the target. Marines practiced malfunction clearance drills, employing the tap, rack, bang method until it became second nature. They were trained to keep track of their shots, reloading before the slide, locked back whenever feasible, thus ensuring a continuous capability for fire. In contrast, Japanese pistol training was largely minimal and ceremonial. The training manual of the Imperial Japanese Army allocated 2 pages to pistol marksmanship, in contrast to 12 pages dedicated to sword techniques. Officers were provided with approximately 50 rounds of training ammunition annually, contingent upon availability. The focus was on precision shooting at stationary targets from formal stances rather than on combat effectiveness. Many officers entered combat having fired fewer rounds through their Type 14 pistols than American Marines did in a single day of training. Japanese tactical doctrine regarded pistols as symbols of authority instead of practical combat tools. The primary functions of these weapons included enforcing discipline, executing deserters or cowards, committing honorable suicide when capture appeared inevitable, and carrying out executions of prisoners. The notion of utilizing pistols as primary weapons in assaults was deemed absurd, as the warrior's sword was seen as a representation of his soul. This philosophical oversight hindered the acknowledgement of the pistol's tactical significance in contemporary close combat. In contrast, American doctrine evolved continuously based on feedback from combat experiences. Following the Battle of Guadalcanal, training began to emphasize shooting from prone and supine positions, which are common when one is wounded or seeking cover. After the Battle of Tarawa, where Marines engaged in combat in waist-deep water, training incorporated waterborne operations, focusing on keeping weapons dry during landings, clearing water from barrels, and executing immediate actions post-immersion. In response to reports of Japanese infiltrators in marine foxholes, training also included weapon retention techniques and shooting at contact distances. The philosophies regarding ammunition differed significantly. Americans designed the 45 ACP cartridge with a singular goal to achieve maximum stopping power within practical limits. The velocity was intentionally maintained at subsonic levels to prevent transonic instability. The weight of the bullet was optimized to maximize momentum transfer, while the bullet's rainbow trajectory at distance was considered irrelevant, as pistol engagements typically occurred within 25 yards. Conversely, the development of the Japanese 8mm Nambu cartridge prioritized velocity and trajectory, aiming for rifle-like performance from a pistol cartridge. The quest for inappropriate features compromised stopping power for minimal practical benefit. Cultural influences shaped the use of weapons. American individualism fostered personal initiative and adaptability. Marines customized their M1911A1s by filing sights for quicker draws, stippling front straps for improved grip, and shortening triggers for smaller hands. Such alterations would have been unimaginable in the Japanese military, where conformity was paramount and initiative was discouraged among lower ranks. The Japanese notion of bamboo spear spirit, which held that spiritual strength could surpass material shortcomings, permeated military ideology. When Chinese forces expressed concerns about the Type 14's inadequacy against Russian-supplied arms, Japanese advisors attributed the failures to a lack of warrior spirit rather than inferior weaponry. This refusal to acknowledge material realities hindered systematic advancements in weapon systems. In contrast, American pragmatism insisted on measurable effectiveness. The Bureau of Ordnance engaged in ongoing testing of ammunition performance, gathering data on velocity, pressure, accuracy, and terminal ballistics. Input from combat units prompted modifications, such as improved magazine springs following reports of feeding issues, stronger extractors after extraction failure reports, and enhanced rust-preventive finishes for tropical conditions. Each modification was subjected to testing prior to implementation, ensuring that enhancements genuinely improved performance. The Pacific Theater served as the ultimate testing ground for weapon reliability, exposing both American and Japanese pistols to environmental extremes that would have been unfeasible to replicate in peacetime evaluations. From the freezing illusions to the equatorial Solomons, and from coral atolls barely above sea level to volcanic mountains, these conditions challenged every facet of weapon design and production. The climate of Guadalcanal epitomized tropical hell. Rainfall annually surpassed 200, with humidity consistently at 100%. Nighttime temperatures varied from 75 degree F to daily highs of 95 degree F, but felt as if they were 115 degree F based on marine reports. Metal corroded overnight. Leather deteriorated within weeks. Wooden stocks became warped and cracked. In such conditions, the M1911A1's parkerized finish, a phosphate coating that absorbed oil, demonstrated its superiority over bluing. Even when surface rust developed, the pistol maintained its functionality. The Type 14's blued finish, attractive when new, offered limited protection against corrosion. Surface rust manifested within days, advancing to severe pitting in a matter of weeks. Marine armorer Sergeant Thomas Morrison serving with the 1st Marine Division on Guadalcanal, chronicled the maintenance difficulties in his journal. The 45s required daily cleaning, yet continued to operate even when they appeared in poor condition. We utilized motor oil, gun oil, and even coconut oil, anything to ensure they remained operational. The captured pistols would rust solid within 3 days. Their springs would break when forced open. We have a collection of them that we cannot even disassemble. Tarawa posed different challenges with coral sand finer than talcum powder, infiltrating every mechanism. The island's lack of vegetation provided no shade from the equatorial sun, which heated metal to unbearable temperatures. Marines wrapped pistol grips in cloth or tape to avoid burns. Water was critically limited, with only 5 gallons per day allocated for a battalion, rendering weapon cleaning unfeasible. The M1911A1's loose tolerances allowed it to function despite sand intrusion. Marines learned to vigorously operate the slide before use, enabling sand to fall through the gaps. The Type 14's tight tolerances caused sand particles to jam the mechanisms completely. Pleo, in September 1944, recorded the highest temperatures of the Pacific War, with official readings reaching 150 degrees F. However, temperatures in fighting positions among the coral ridges exceeded 120 degrees F. On certain days, Marines experienced more heat-related casualties than combat injuries. Metal expanded significantly at these extreme temperatures. The M1911A, engineered with tolerances for thermal expansion, continued to operate effectively. In contrast, the Type 14, which was built with precise peacetime tolerances, encountered binding issues as its components expanded at different rates. Marine Private Eugene Sledge, serving with K Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines in Plu, noted, "Everything metal was too hot to touch. We wrapped our rifle slings around our hands to carry them. Canteens burned our lips. My 45 was so hot that the rounds in the magazine felt warm to the touch when I unloaded it. Yet it functioned. It always functioned." Ima's volcanic ash posed unique challenges. The fine black sand, which is actually pulverized volcanic glass, was extremely abrasive. It infiltrated sealed mechanisms, significantly accelerating wear. The island's sulfur springs produced corrosive vapors that etched metal surfaces. After 5 weeks of combat, many rifles and machine guns needed replacement due to bore, erosion. The M1911A1 pistols, with their straightforward mechanisms and sturdy construction, continued to function despite the increased wear. Conversely, the Type 14s experienced extraction failures as their chambers eroded and cases became stuck. The Aleutian campaign presented contrasting extremes. During the ATU invasion in May 1943, temperatures fell below freezing, accompanied by winds reaching 100 mmF. Lubricants thickened to a tar-like consistency. Breath condensation froze on metal surfaces, forming ice that hindered actions. The M1911A1 operated without lubrication. Soldiers adapted by removing all oil from their weapons, running them dry. The Type 14's intricate dual recoil spring system necessitated lubrication for operation, rendering it inoperable in extreme cold. Saltwater immersion during amphibious operations posed challenges for both designs. At Tarawa, Marines waded 500 yards through chest-deep water while under fire. Weapons were fully submerged for 10 to 15 minutes. The M1911A1, designed with drainage channels and minimal enclosed spaces, could be shaken out and would function immediately. In contrast, the Type 14, with its enclosed trigger mechanism and complex internals, retained water that required disassembly to drain, which was impossible under fire. Monsoon conditions in New Guinea and the Philippines posed significant challenges to waterproofing. Continuous rainfall persisted for weeks, rendering it impossible to keep weapons dry. All organic materials deteriorated, including leather holsters, cloth, and wood grips. The plastic grips of the M1911A1, introduced in 1943, were resistant to moisture. Steel components necessitated regular oiling but continued to function effectively. The wooden grips of the Type 14, particularly on late-war models, absorbed moisture, causing them to swell and eventually crack the frames. The magazine retention spring, which was added in 1939, became rusted in place, hindering magazine changes. Maintenance supplies illustrated differing philosophies. American forces were provided with ample cleaning materials, including bore brushes, cleaning rods, patches, CLP cleaner lubricant, preservative, and specialized lubricants for extreme conditions. Every Marine was equipped with a pistol cleaning kit. By 1944, Japanese forces frequently lacked essential cleaning supplies. Captured Japanese documents revealed that units shared single cleaning rods, utilized palm fronds as patches, and resorted to motor oil when gun oil was not available. Field modifications showcased American adaptability. Marines discovered that polishing feed ramps with emery cloth enhanced feeding, using valve grinding compound to alleviate slide to frame fit, improved reliability, and replacing recoil springs with those from damaged weapons maintained proper tension. Such modifications, executed at the battalion level, ensured that weapons remained functional despite severe wear. In contrast, Japanese forces, lacking spare parts and modification capabilities, simply discarded malfunctioning Type 14s. The Battle of Okinawa, which began on April 1st, 1945, represented the ultimate test of American and Japanese small arms during the Pacific War's largest amphibious operation. Codenamed Operation Iceberg, the invasion involved 183,000 Lalun, American soldiers and Marines facing off against 110,000 Japanese defenders on an island that would serve as the staging area for the planned invasion of Japan. The 82-day conflict would ultimately showcase the dominance of American weaponry in the war's most brutal engagements. The landscape of Okinawa was drastically different from earlier Pacific battlegrounds. The island extended 60 miles in length and varied between 2 to 18 miles in width, featuring open agricultural land in the northern region and rugged hills filled with caves in the southern area. Japanese General Mitsuru Ushima had several months to establish defenses, constructing a complex network of interconnected caves, tunnels, and fortified positions designed to funnel American troops into lethal zones. This combat zone would necessitate close quarters fighting, where the use of pistols often dictated survival. The American contingent comprised the entire 10th Army under Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr., which included the Army's 24th Corps, along with the 7th, 27th, 77th, and 96th Infantry Divisions, as well as the Marine Corps' 3rd Amphibious Corps, 1st and 6th Marine Divisions. These forces were equipped with over 15,000 M1911A pistols, averaging nearly one for every 12 combat personnel. The ammunition stockpile included 10 million rounds of .45 ACP, reflecting insights gained regarding ammunition usage during extended operations. The Japanese 32nd Army, bolstered by naval personnel and Okinawan conscripts, constituted Japan's final unified military force outside its home islands. Officers were armed with Type 14 Nambus, but faced severe ammunition shortages. Captured documents from the Japanese 62nd Division revealed that only 20 rounds per pistol were allocated for the entire campaign. In contrast, American forces had a basic load of 21 rounds per pistol, with resupply being virtually unlimited. The initial landings on April 1st, 1945, which coincided with Easter Sunday and April Fool's Day, encountered unexpectedly light resistance as Ushijima had repositioned his troops to fortified locations in the south. However, when American forces reached the Japanese primary defensive lines at Kakazu Ridge on April 9th, the true nature of the battle became apparent. The combat escalated into brutal close-quarters fighting, where distances were measured in mere feet, and survival frequently hinged on who could deploy effective firepower the quickest. Technical Sergeant Beaufort Anderson of the 96th Infantry Division was awarded the Medal of Honor on April 13th during the assault on Kakazu Ridge. When his unit found itself pinned down, Anderson bravely launched a solo attack on Japanese positions using grenades and small arms. His citation highlights that he eliminated 25 Japanese soldiers in close combat. Eyewitnesses reported that Anderson extensively utilized his M1911A1 when Japanese soldiers emerged from spider holes at point-blank range. "The 45 saved my life a dozen times that day," he remarked later. Anderson recounted, "When they popped up from holes right under you, there was no time to swing a rifle around. The 45 knocked them down instantly." The Japanese executed large-scale counterattacks throughout the battle, culminating in Operation Tenno on May 4th, when Ushima committed his entire reserve in a desperate offensive. During this assault, close combat became widespread across the entire front. Marine Private First Class Harold Agerholm of the 4th Battalion, 10th Marines, would posthumously receive the Medal of Honor for evacuating 45 wounded Marines under fire. Witnesses noted that Agerholm carried his M1911A1 in one hand while dragging the wounded with the other, firing at Japanese infiltrators who approached his casualties. The cave warfare on Okinawa created distinct combat conditions that underscored the significance of pistols. The Japanese had converted natural caves into intricate defensive structures with multiple levels, interconnecting tunnels, and concealed firing ports. Assaulting these positions necessitated that Marines and soldiers enter confined spaces where rifles were cumbersome. The M1911A1 emerged as the primary weapon for clearing caves. Marine Corporal Donnell, his of the 1st Marine Division, described cave operations. You'd throw in white phosphorus grenades to burn out the oxygen, then go in with pistols and flashlights. The 45 was ideally suited for this task. In those tight quarters, the impact from the 45 was remarkable. We would attach tactical lights or flashlights taped to the barrels of our pistols. You would observe movement, aim, and fire. The 45 would propel Japanese soldiers backward against the cave walls. The technical advantage of the 45 ACP in restricted spaces became quantifiably evident. Within caves and tunnels, the 45's subsonic speed resulted in a less disorienting muzzle blast for the shooter while delivering optimal energy to targets. The momentum of the heavy bullets penetrated through web gear and equipment that could deflect lighter, faster projectiles. Post-war terminal ballistic studies indicated that the 45 ACP produced larger temporary wound cavities in gelatin than any other military pistol cartridge, which was crucial when targets needed to be swiftly incapacitated in confined areas where injured enemies could trigger grenades. Sugarloaf Hill, a small elevation that anchored the Japanese shoreline, became the scene of the most intense close-quarters combat from May 12th to 18th. The 6th Marine Division incurred over 2,000 casualties while capturing this single position. Marines launched 17 assaults before ultimately securing the hill. During these engagements, combat frequently occurred at handshake distance. Marine Sergeant James Stevens recounted, "We were battling in the rain with mud up to our knees. Japanese soldiers would appear from concealed positions right among us, and your rifle would be filled with mud, but the 45 always functioned. I witnessed Marines and Japanese soldiers firing at each other from 5 feet apart. The Marine, armed with the 45, consistently triumphed in those confrontations. By late May, the inadequacy of Japanese small arms became critical. The operations officer of the 32nd Army, Colonel Hiramichi Yahara, noted in his post-war memoir, "Our Type 14 pistols had become nearly ineffective. Ammunition was almost depleted, and those weapons that remained operational often malfunctioned due to rain and mud." American soldiers appeared to possess an endless supply of ammunition for their formidable pistols, capable of instantly killing a man even with peripheral hits. The onset of the monsoon season in mid-May transformed Okinawa into a landscape of mud. Foxholes became inundated with water, and weapons were repeatedly submerged. The drainage channels and loose tolerances of the M1911A1 enabled it to operate effectively despite being immersed in mud. Marines adapted by keeping their pistols inside their shirts when not in use, utilizing body heat to prevent rust. In contrast, the Type 14, with its enclosed design and tight tolerances, became severely clogged with mud. The disparity in ammunition quality became pronounced in Okinawa. American 45 ACP ammunition consistently performed well throughout the campaign. Lot testing indicated velocity variations of less than 30 feet per second and no misfires in 100,000 rounds tested. Conversely, Japanese 8mm Nambu ammunition, produced in 1945 amid bombing and material shortages, exhibited catastrophic quality control failures. Captured ammunition examined by American ordnance units revealed a 30% misfire rate due to defective primers, velocity variations exceeding 300 feet per second within single lots, case head separations from brittle brass, and squib loads that lodge bullets in barrels. The Japanese executed their final organized resistance in the Kan Peninsula at the southern tip of Okinawa in mid-June. In this intricate network of coral caves and ridges, combat descended to its most primitive form. American forces employed flamethrowers, demolition charges, and small arms to systematically dismantle Japanese positions. The 96th Infantry Division reported the expenditure of 450,000 rounds of .45 ACP ammunition during June alone, surpassing the total usage of many divisions in entire European campaigns. Private First Class Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector medic who declined to carry weapons, provided unique insights into the effectiveness of pistols. Serving with the 77th Infantry Division, Doss observed numerous close combat engagements while tending to the wounded. In his interviews conducted after the war, he remarked, "The contrast between our .45 caliber pistols and their handguns was stark. I witnessed Japanese officers firing their pistols at our soldiers, who continued to fight. However, when our soldiers struck a Japanese soldier with a .45, he fell and remained down. That pistol was responsible for saving numerous American lives." The statistics from the battles illustrate the narrative of American material superiority. American forces experienced 12,520 fatalities and 36,631 injuries. In contrast, Japanese casualties included around 110,000 military deaths, along with 100,000 Okinawan civilians. The kill ratio of 10.1 in favor of America showcased superior firepower at all levels, from naval artillery to individual sidearms. In close quarters, where personal weapons dictated survival, the M1911A1's superiority enhanced American effectiveness significantly. The final comparison of M1911A1 production against Type 14 production reveals more than mere figures. It highlights the critical misjudgment of Imperial Japan in attempting to wage an industrial war using artisanal production techniques. By the conclusion of the war, American factories had manufactured 178 U.S. 742 M1911A1 pistols from 1941 to 1945. In contrast, Japan produced approximately 400,000 Type 14 pistols over nearly 20 years from 1926 to 1945. This production ratio of 4.71 during the war years underrepresents the actual disparity when factoring in quality standardization and ammunition availability. The American production approach transformed manufacturing processes. Remington Rand's Syracuse facility, which transitioned from typewriter manufacturing, achieved extraordinary efficiency through innovative practices. They implemented broach rifling, allowing for the creation of flawless barrels in single passes, as opposed to the traditional cut rifling that necessitated multiple passes. The statistical process control developed by Walter Schuhart and executed by Western Electric engineers ensured tolerances were maintained while enhancing speed. By 1943, Remington Rand was producing 1,000 pistols each day with a rejection rate of less than 1%. The learning curve illustrated the adaptability of American industry. Colt, despite its extensive experience, required 2 man-hours were required to produce a single M1911A, specifically one frame in 1942. Remington Rand, which began with no prior experience in firearms, managed to achieve a production rate of 0.8 man-hours per frame by 1943, thanks to exceptional industrial engineering. The Ithaca Gun Company introduced fixture designs that decreased machining setups by 60%. These innovations were subsequently adopted by all manufacturers. The interchangeability of parts was absolute. In November 1943, the Army Ordnance conducted a demonstration at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. Armorers disassembled 100 M1911A1 pistols from various manufacturers, mixed all the parts randomly and reassembled them while blindfolded. Remarkably, all 100 pistols functioned flawlessly. This interchangeability was vital when depot-level maintenance required the assembly of operational weapons from damaged components. In contrast, Japanese Type 14 parts, even from the same manufacturer, frequently necessitated hand-fitting. The economic efficiency was remarkable. In 1942, the unit cost of an M1911A1 was $3,142. By 1945, advancements in production methods reduced this cost to 15, which was less than half the original price, despite wartime inflation. The Japanese Type 14, which required significant hand-fitting, maintained a cost of 78 yen throughout the war, equivalent to 31.20 in 1941, but represented a much larger share of Japanese industrial capacity. The production of ammunition far surpassed that of weapon manufacturing. American factories produced approximately 3.5 billion rounds of .45 ACP during World War II. This amounted to 862 rounds for each M1911A1 manufactured, providing ample supply for extensive training and combat use. In comparison, Japanese at-a-millimeter Nambu production totaled around 100 million rounds from 1926 to 1945, averaging 250 rounds per pistol over 2 decades. By 1945, Japanese forces allocated only 20 rounds per pistol for entire campaigns. Quality control highlighted philosophical differences. Every American M1911A1 underwent proof testing with high-pressure cartridges that generated 30% above standard pressure. Barrels were air-gauged to ensure dimensional consistency, and function testing required 100 rounds to be fired without any malfunctions. Random samples underwent 5,000 endurance tests to assess their durability. Metallurgical analysis confirmed the adequacy of heat treatment and material composition. The quality control measures in Japan, which were already minimal before the war, virtually vanished by 1944. Late war Type 14s exhibit tool marks, dimensional inconsistencies, and soft metal that would not have passed any inspection standards. A comparison of the supply chains revealed significant differences. American manufacturers utilized specialized steel alloys such as SAE 4140 for barrels and 8620 for frames, produced to stringent specifications. Carbide cutting tools, a testament to American industrial prowess, maintained precise dimensions across thousands of components. In contrast, Japanese manufacturers by 1944 resorted to using whatever steel was accessible. Captured Type 14's display frames constructed from repurposed ship armor, barrels made from artillery brass, and springs sourced from salvaged automotive parts. The proliferation of subcontractor networks further amplified American advantages. Grip manufacturers, including Colt Plastics Company, Franzite Company, and Keys Fiber Company, produced millions of synthetic grips that were resistant to tropical conditions. Spring manufacturers such as Wolf Company and Associated Spring Corporation supplied consistent springs that were heat-treated to meet specific tension requirements. Magazine contractors like Scoville Manufacturing and Risden Manufacturing produced magazines with tolerances that ensured a universal fit. In contrast, Japanese production remained vertically integrated within arsenals, which restricted production capacity and hindered the benefits of specialization. The allocation of training ammunition highlighted differing priorities. American forces allocated 240 rounds per soldier for basic pistol qualification and 500 rounds for advanced training. Combat units received 100 rounds monthly for sustainment training, resulting in a total training expenditure that exceeded 500 million rounds. Conversely, Japanese officers, who often purchased their own ammunition, typically fired fewer than 100 rounds annually. Many entered combat having fired their Type 14 fewer times than American Marines did in a single training session. Replacement rates unveiled the realities of combat. American forces replaced around 15% of M1911A1 pistols each year due to losses in combat, irreparable damage, or excessive wear. The industrial base effectively managed this attrition while simultaneously increasing the overall inventory. In contrast, Japanese forces were unable to replace their losses. Units that suffered damage to their pistols in combat simply had to operate without them. By the time of Okinawa, numerous Japanese officers resorted to carrying swords exclusively as their pistols had long since become inoperative. The final assessment of the Pacific War revealed truths that went beyond mere technical specifications or production figures. In the context of history's largest naval conflict, fought over millions of square miles of ocean and thousands of islands, the superiority of the M1911A1 over the Type 14 Nambu symbolized the triumph of American industrial democracy over Japanese military feudalism. The mathematics of terminal ballistics were undeniable. The 45 ACP's 230 grain bullet, traveling at 830 feet per second, delivered 370 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, resulting in temporary wound cavities exceeding 4 inches in diameter in ballistic gelatin. Conversely, the 8mm Nambu's 102 grain bullet at 650 feet per second produced 256 foot-pounds, creating wound channels that were only slightly larger than the caliber itself. This 44% energy advantage directly correlated to stopping power, which is the capacity to incapacitate an enemy immediately before they could continue their assault. However, energy alone did not provide the full picture. The 45 ACP's heavier bullet maintained velocity more effectively, retaining 89% of its muzzle energy at 50 yards compared to 76% for the 8mm Nambu. The larger frontal area of 451 inches versus 320 inches resulted in 98% greater tissue displacement. The subsonic velocity eliminated the ballistic crack, thereby reducing shooter disorientation in confined environments. The straight-walled case extracted reliably from fouled chambers. Every technical aspect favored the American cartridge. The weapons themselves mirrored the characteristics of their cartridges, with the M1911A1's sturdy construction weighing 39 ounces, effectively managing recoil while providing a stable shooting platform. The single-action trigger, which breaks at 4 to 5 pounds, facilitated precise shot placement even under stress. The grip safety and manual safety mechanisms effectively prevented accidental discharges while ensuring immediate readiness. Although the 7-round magazine holds one less round than the Type 14, it can be replaced in mere seconds, and the pistol is capable of firing its chambered round even without a magazine. The purported advantages of the Type 14 were ultimately illusory. Its lighter weight of 32 ounces made recoil more challenging to manage. The heavy and gritty trigger pull negatively impacted accuracy. Additionally, the placement of the safety necessitated two-handed operation. The magazine retention spring rendered reloading nearly impossible in high-stress situations. Furthermore, the magazine disconnect safety turned magazine damage into a complete failure of the weapon. Every claimed improvement actually diminished combat effectiveness. The evidence of combat validation was substantial, as demonstrated at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. The M1911A1 established its reliability in thousands of close-quarters engagements. Both Marines and soldiers placed their trust in the pistol, confident in its ability to function despite exposure to mud, sand, water, or neglect. The psychological impact of the weapon further amplified its effectiveness. Japanese soldiers came to fear the distinctive sound of the 45 caliber, recognizing it as a harbinger of imminent death. Post-war evaluations conducted by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey included comprehensive interviews with surviving Japanese officers. Colonel Susumu Nishira, a staff officer with the 32nd Army during the Okinawa campaign, remarked, "Your 45 caliber automatic pistol was greatly feared. It could incapacitate a man with hits to the extremities. Our pistols required multiple center hits to neutralize an American soldier." This disparity in effectiveness was demoralizing for our forces. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, who commanded Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, noted in his final report prior to his death, "American material superiority is overwhelming. Their personal firearms, especially their formidable pistols, provide them with a significant advantage in close-quarters combat where spiritual strength cannot surpass mechanical dominance." This acknowledgement from an officer who had served for years in America as a military attaché indicated Japanese awareness of their material shortcomings. The industrial gap was unbridgeable. In 1943 alone, American factories produced over 600,000 M1911 pistols, a quantity that far exceeded the total production of Type 14s by Japan over 2 decades. The quality of American manufacturing improved consistently throughout the production process, while Japanese quality deteriorated. The supply of American ammunition was boundless, whereas Japanese forces were compelled to conserve every round. American training programs were comprehensive in stark contrast to the minimal training received by Japanese forces. Every quantifiable metric favored American troops by ratios ranging from 3 to 1 to 10 to 1. The human toll underscored these advantages. During the Pacific War, Marine and Army units equipped with M1911A1 pistols consistently achieved kill ratios surpassing 10.1 in close combat scenarios. At Iwo Jima, 6,121 Americans lost their lives compared to 21,000 Japanese, resulting in a 3.1 ratio despite the Americans attacking fortified positions. In Okinawa, the casualties were 12,520 Americans against 110,000 Japanese, yielding an 8.8.1 ratio. Although numerous factors contributed to these discrepancies, the effectiveness of individual firearms in close combat was pivotal. Testimonies from veterans delivered the conclusive evidence. Marine Gunnery Sergeant John Bassalone, prior to his death at Iwo Jima, remarked, "The 44 automatic is the finest military pistol ever manufactured. It strikes with the force of a sledgehammer and is utterly reliable. One shot resolves any dispute." Technical Sergeant Charles Lindbergh of the 3rd Marine Division asserted, "That pistol preserved more Marine lives than any other armament. When Japanese soldiers infiltrated our lines at night, the 45 was what repelled them." Japanese veterans who endured American 45 ACP wounds carried distinctive scars. Dr. Teru Wenyu, who treated veterans at the Tokyo Veterans Hospital after the war, observed, "Wounds inflicted by the American 45 caliber pistol were unmistakably identifiable decades later. The extensive tissue damage resulted in unique scarring patterns. Veterans who were shot with this weapon felt fortunate to have survived." The legacy of the M1911A1 reached far beyond World War II. Special Operations Forces utilized it throughout Korea, Vietnam, and into the 21st century. The Type 14 disappeared immediately following the Japanese surrender, supplanted by American firearms. Modern Japanese self-defense forces have never sought to create indigenous pistols. Acknowledging the futility of competing with Western arms development, the broader implications extended beyond mere weaponry. The M1911A1 symbolized American industrial democracy. It was standardized, mass-produced, effective, and accessible to every soldier, irrespective of rank or wealth. Conversely, the Type 14 epitomized Japanese military feudalism, being handcrafted, inconsistent, inadequate, and limited to officers who could afford to purchase it. These firearms reflected their respective societies' approaches to warfare. Ultimately, the Pacific War confirmed the conclusion of the Thompson-LaGarde Tests from 1904. In close combat, stopping power is crucial for survival. The M1911A1 provided that stopping power reliably and consistently under all conditions millions of times over. The Type 14 Nambu, however, failed to deliver satisfactory performance even in optimal conditions. This disparity, multiplied across millions of individual encounters, significantly contributed to American victory. The mathematics of death during the Pacific War were exacting and merciless. When Staff Sergeant William Bordelong charged Japanese pillboxes at Tarawa, when Sergeant John Bassalone defended Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, when countless unnamed Marines and soldiers battled in unmarked caves on forgotten islands, they wielded a weapon that would not let them down. The M1911A1 automatic pistol firing the 45 ACP cartridge. Each trigger pull propelled a 230-grain projectile at 830 feet per second, delivering 370 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, creating wound channels that swiftly incapacitated enemy combatants. This straightforward equation Mass multiplied by velocity squared and divided by 450, 240 was crucial in determining survival in numerous close-quarters confrontations. The Japanese Type 14 Nambu, firing its 102-grain bullet at 1.65 feet per second for 256 foot-pounds of energy, consistently failed this mathematical assessment of combat effectiveness. The production figures narrated an equally compelling tale. American factories produced 842 M1911A1 pistols during World War II, backed by 3.5 billion rounds of ammunition. In contrast, Japan manufactured around 400,000 Type 14 pistols over a span of 2 decades with an estimated total of 100 million rounds. This 4.7.1 production advantage in pistols and a 35.1 advantage in ammunition during the war years illustrated an industrial dominance that no amount of spiritual resolve could surpass. However, beyond mere statistics lies a fundamental reality of modern warfare. Victory is secured by nations that merge industrial capability with engineering excellence, that prioritize the lives of individual soldiers by equipping them with the finest weapons available, and that learn from combat experiences to systematically enhance their warfare tools. The M1911A1 epitomized these principles, while the Type 14 Nambu represented their opposite. Ultimately, the outcome of the Pacific War was influenced by numerous factors: strategy, logistics, code breaking, naval strength, and atomic weaponry. Yet, in those critical moments when combat devolved to its most basic form, with one man confronting another at close range and death imminent, the American Marine or soldier wielding an M1911A possessed a significant advantage over his Japanese counterpart, armed with a Type 14 Nambu. The roar of the 45 ACP reverberated from Pearl Harbor to Tokyo Bay. Each shot represented a small but pivotal contribution to victory. The M1911A1 did not single-handedly secure the Pacific War, but in the harsh calculations of close combat, it guaranteed that American forces maintained a substantial advantage that compounded across thousands of encounters, ultimately influencing the war's resolution. In the mathematics of survival, where the ability to stop an opponent equated to victory and mechanical failures resulted in death, America's M1911, a .45 caliber pistol, reigned supreme, while Japan's Type 14 Nambu was completely, devastatingly, and fatally outmatched. The final word is attributed to Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, who recognized the critical role of individual weapons in achieving victory. Our technological advancements, particularly the superiority of individual firearms such as the M1911 automatic pistol, provided our Marines and soldiers with significant advantages in close-quarters combat. When confrontations devolved into personal encounters at short range, American forces triumphed due to their possession of superior weapons that operated reliably even in the most adverse conditions imaginable. This technological edge, replicated millions of times throughout the Pacific theater, was instrumental in securing our victory.